Welcome to Manolo AI's The Silk Road podcast, where we dive deep into the evolving world of supply chains. Whether you're a supply chain professional, business leader, or just curious about how products get from point A to point B, you're in the right place. Hello, and welcome to the Silk Road podcast. I am your host, Priya Thinagar, and with me today is my good friend, Juan Cora, CEO and founder of Aquatio Software. Aquatio helps leading enterprises enhance their supply chain resiliency through digital collaboration. Welcome, Juan. We're thrilled to have you with us today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Priya. It's very exciting to be able to participate in one of your first podcasts as well. So thrilled to be here myself.
Juan, last time we were speaking, you mentioned that there's some exciting things happening at Aquatio. Tell us a bit about yourself, Aquatio, and what's the latest at your new company?
Yeah, a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from San Juan, Puerto Rico. Though I have bounced back and forth between the island and the mainland throughout most of my life. After graduating from high school, I went to a small college north of Indianapolis called Taylor University, and I eventually graduated from there with a double major in math and computer science. Now I'm living in Marietta with my wife and my two teenage daughters, which are certainly the light of our life and also very much keep us on our toes. So with regards to Aquatio, of course, as you mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO. I've been privileged enough to be in supply chain now for 25 plus years, primarily focused on building, implementing, and supporting supply chain solutions. Now, more recently, of course, I've been placing my energies and focus on building Aquatio, which has been an absolute blessing and one of the top highlights of my career. Recently, of course, as you mentioned, we have some milestones to share and to brag about. You know, having just launched our first major release to the market a few weeks ago. So our focus right now and our priority is, of course, all hands on deck to get the message out to prospects and enterprises that would certainly stand to gain from a solution like ours. So exciting times for sure.
Congratulations on your GA release. I'm sure there's quite a bit of customers waiting there to hear all about the new product and how it can simplify things in their lives. So thank you for sharing that. Your company is named Aquatio. It's a rather unique name. How did you come about with this name? What's the story behind this name?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the things that over the course of my 25 years, I ultimately came upon a bit of a realization. And I think one of those is that, you know, in supply chain, we're a bit of a fragmented bunch. And I think to some extent that's linked to how we've deployed technologies and the fact that, you know, that there's plenty of siloed platforms that are out there that, you know, lead to the types of duplication of data that, of course, results in inaccurate information and friction. And so as I was considering how I would contribute to our supply chain industry and the types of use cases that I wanted to kind of focus on, one of the things that came to mind was supply chain events really are singularly sourced. They really are, you know, a single event that is oftentimes redundantly digitized across multiple siloed platforms. And, you know, I felt like because of that, you saw a lot of the type of inefficiencies and waste and inaccuracies and all the different challenges that are out there. And so I then realized, as a bit of, I guess, euphemism, if you will, but that, hey, just like the water cycle is singularly sourced, but certainly shared across a number of manifestations, whether it's snow-capped mountains or it's, you know, lakes or oceans or tropical beaches, the reality is that they still stem from a singular source. And I believe supply chain events in many respects would do well if we were able to actually leverage them in a manner that is singularly sourced and shared. And so that's really the sort of background to the name Aquatio, is that it really is a way of being able to project where I want to see if we can take much of the supply chain industry. And it's really to be able to drive a, you know, again, a shared view of digital assets that would benefit a supply network.
Wow, very cool. I guess it comes from growing up in and around water and just enjoying water, and it's an ode to your upbringing and background, I guess. So that's very cool. Yeah, starting a business is definitely not for the faint of heart. What got you to this place of starting your own company? And tell us a little bit about this journey. How has the journey been so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's not for the faint of heart. It's something that everybody has to be ready to to take on. I think at some point I realized that I was truly wired to innovate, build, and create. One of my mantras during my career was really staying close to the product and staying close to the customer, because I think that very much crystallizes my inclination to build solutions that really bring value to customers. And of course, having that sort of ongoing feedback loop between the customer experience and what we infuse into technology is something that, from my perspective, is absolutely critical to drive successful solutions. So when it came to considering my next career move, I think it was pretty clear to me that I wanted to go back to my roots and really build something novel and compelling that would have a positive impact on customers and maybe even the supply chain industry writ large. Now, I, of course, as I mentioned, had spent enough time in the field to identify some of the more persistent gaps that would consistently show up throughout my career. So I had a pretty good sense, I think, for the types of use cases that I would want to prioritize. But as I started to kind of get serious about the challenges that I wanted to tackle, again, I couldn't help but land on the fact that, again, we continue to deal with the types of inefficiencies and waste and redundancies because of the various silos that all enterprises are having to work through as it relates to supply chains. And so, I guess as the main takeaway from what I call my cave time was that supply networks will never arrive at the level of enhanced collaboration that is truly required to be successful until all systems and platforms can really undergird a basic shared data set or a singular shared source of truth. And again, as I was mentioning before, that's how I came to the name Aquatio as well. So leveraging that sort of rubric, if you will, I got to work on one of the most persistent gaps that's affected by this fragmentation, and that's the lack of digital enablement of the shipping office.
Definitely your experience got a wealth of background in the supply chain industry. You've probably seen a ton of customer implementation. You've probably helped implement quite a few and also extend what customers have. So it's neat that you were able to find the gaps, the inefficiencies, things that were worth solving, really falling in love with the problems, looking at the customer to kind of work backwards from it to say, where do you want to go next? I'm sure our audience would want to hear your quick elevator pitch. So could we hear your elevator pitch?
Yeah,
Roll.
absolutely.
Okay.
For sure. So I've spent 25 years streamlining fulfillment and transportation for leading enterprises, and the shipping office, which sits at the very intersection of these two, is often the ignored stepchild. And there's a simple reason for that, and it's the lack of interoperability that really should take place between the various participants that are driving logistics handoffs. You simply can't assume the shipper, carrier, and customer are going to be leveraging that same technology or frankly any technology whatsoever. So what they're left with is resorting to highly interoperable ways of recording events and communicating with each other, right? So as it turns out, paper is highly interoperable. Emails and phone calls are also highly interoperable. But of course, these methods are also what make enterprises susceptible to the, again, fomenting of silos, the redundancies, the inaccuracies that, of course, add friction and excess labor and really cost shippers dearly. So contrast that with a seamless, interoperable set of workflows that engage all participants through highly accessible QR code scans, all the while enabling that singular shared copy of the shipment, the events that transpire against it, and any and all digital documents that are representing it. No more filing cabinets, no more phone calls to the CSRs, no more emails to your transportation team or accounting teams to be able to hunt down the bill of lading, chargebacks, right? All of these different things all go away. If this resonates with you, give us a call. We'd love to be able to start a conversation and ultimately work to address some of these supply chain needs.
Very interesting. No more filing cabinets, less paper, maybe, and maybe at some point, no paper at all. Interestingly, just yesterday, I was reading an article that was posted by Dave Clark, who was the SVP of operations at Amazon and then came on to run Flexport as their CEO. Got out of Flexport and, definitely someone that's seen the fulfillment space in Amazon, the supply chain problems. And he made a comment that resonated for me to where you're going. And he's trying to solve, similar problems that you're solving with different, obviously, different solutions. But it was interesting that there's so many different companies starting to think about this problem and saying, we could be better than this. Why are we not challenging the status quo? So he said, disjointed systems patched to, like everything is fragmented, and he called it, and I think you called it last time we were speaking, you said Frankenstein software. And he said the same. He said, there's so much investment that's being made, but companies still rely on like Frankenstein software because there's all these things patched together. They're all incompatible technologies. They don't communicate effectively. And he was talking about this leading to inefficient workarounds, and all critical decisions are being made in Excel. Excel's not designed for the complexity. Paper is not designed for the complexity of supply chains. Excel's not designed for it, nor is phone calls and filing cabinets. So really resonated for me that he started a company called Augur, which is also trying to tackle challenges in this space. And he called it the really, interesting part of his quote was like, he said, these are not just like business problems. He said, they're human problems and we really have to take the time to fix it. So I'm super excited that you've taken a problem that is pretty well known, but I think people kind of, think it's okay to use what we have, duct tape and whatever else, and just keep moving. But we need people like you to just say, why not change that? And why can't we change it now? And kind of move forward to fixing this. And they've just secured $100 million funding round from Oak Ventures. And so we're going to, wish you the best, Juan, for success and for you to being able to scale and grow your business as well, similar to some of these companies that are cropping up in this space.
Well, that's great. And you're absolutely right. A lot of folks are starting to pay closer attention to what we're describing as some of these different gaps that have continued to exist. What's curious, you mentioned the different angles that people will take. At some point in my conversations over the last 18 months, I heard somebody make a comment like, pretty much all freight tech is about 3 or 4 features away from being a TMS. And it's almost like, there's just so many different ways that you can kind of like approach the problem. And once you actually address that specific problem, then all this other additional feature function that can be developed comes along with it and complements it and so forth. So you do see a lot of different providers that are actually coming up with different ways to really bridge that gap. But one thing I'll highlight is a lot of people are surprised in my conversations with them that for instance, bill of lading has been around for centuries.
Right.
So we really haven't changed, basically we haven't really changed the actual format of recording events for like 400 years. And so I honestly think it's probably the worst documented case of, but this is how we've always done it.
Exactly. And it's worked.
and so, in a lot of ways it worked, but now we're finding ourselves, of course, in the digital era, and we need to be able to identify where are the opportunities to be able to really drive the type of end-to-end visibility that, seems to be, again, elusive, and it's very much sort of the holy grail. So I think this space that we're kind of focusing in on, especially in the manner that we're doing it, which is driving the type of interoperability across the board and not sort of the patchwork quilt of integrating all these different systems together, I think is very much a game changer as it relates to driving the type of visibility that enterprises are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's, definitely interesting that something that you say is 100 years old, hasn't gone through, any sort of, I guess there's some innovation with like, okay, maybe I'll show it up on a web UI or whatever it is. But it's also the timing, I think, with Gen AI, with a lot of AI tools coming in the market and companies moving towards more digitization and, everything being available so they can get visibility. So much software for visibility, yet every 3PL, every shipper, every carrier will tell you, well, I don't have enough visibility to do the things that I want to do. So kudos to you for honing in on that problem and helping solve something that's very critical for all of these stakeholders. So in your day-to-day, Juan, you work with 3PLs, you're working with shippers, carriers. Give us sort of, and you've got such an amazing, wealth of knowledge from your 20 plus years at Manhattan Associates leading, this transformation as well. Give us a bit of a history lesson on what is this market like and what drives these stakeholders forward? What are they really passionate about? What are they thinking about right now? What's the trend look like in this market today as you're, embarking on this journey?
Excellent. Great question. If you'll indulge me, Priya, there's a broader narrative I'd like to kind of double click on a little bit. And forgive my wonkiness. It's going to start coming out as I actually get going. So forgive me. Simply put, 3PLs, just like everybody else, has been, I think, rattled over the last, 3 to 4 years with some of the changing consumer agency and behavior that we've seen. And of course, its implications on supply chains. So if you look at the numbers, we've essentially doubled e-commerce sales in the US since the pandemic. I think more recently you started to see that start coming down, but all of us are realizing that supply chains that we built based on globalized models from the 90s of offshoring things, et cetera, are simply too rigid to handle the proclivities of the empowered digital consumer. It's no match for today's empowered digital consumer. And so when you think about what's behind that, why is that? Simply, it's no longer acceptable to assume that the consumer will only want what's on the shelves of their favorite local store. Not only do they want anything and everything that is conceivable and is available in any of the marketplaces globally, they want it free, same-day shipping, right? They want a returns label to come with it, and they want it all to be carbon neutral as well.
We want everything to be free, right? Free shipping, free delivery, and I want it where I am, and I want it now. I would have liked it yesterday, but it's okay if I get it now.
That's right, and I want optionality. And by the way, it's not just same day shipping. It needs to come in between 1:30 and 2:30 p.m. because that's when I'm going to be home. And
yeah.
And if you can't give me all of this, then I'm going to move on from your brand, and I'm going to be loud about it too. I'm going to go ahead and announce my disappointment on social media, and it's going to level up a high price on your brand reputation. Now, what I'm describing, of course, is a complete monumental shift in how we cater to consumers and their growing agency within our existing supply chain paradigm. In the previous scheme, I think, we've seen some of the different disruptions that have impacted us over the last few years. And I'm going to walk out on a limb here. I'm sure it might be a little controversial, but when you think about some of the different disruptions like the Suez Canal blockage, I don't think that in the previous scheme 30 years ago, we would have considered that as much of a disruption as it is now, right? Back then, consumers, frankly, they got what they got. 12-month time horizons to be able to determine their production runs and when that would sort of meet the expectations. None of that would fly nowadays because of the volatility and the shifting expectations of that empowered digital consumer. So 3PLs are put in a tough spot because what used to be a sort of an area of focus of retailers and brands that were much more consumer facing Now 3PLs are having to meet a lot of those specific expectations, in a world where, again, that empowered digital consumer is increasingly at the helm of defining and directing those very supply chain needs that are tied, of course, to the 3PL's customers. So that means that 3PLs are now that much more susceptible to some of those challenges. And so you are seeing things like 3PLs are having to invest in order management systems. They're having to invest in reverse logistics or returns management. They're having to invest in supply chain visibility. In fact, I think there was a recent study that was just published recently by Logistics Management that outlined how supply chain visibility is the most identified area of change for 3PLs, coming at 68% of those polled. And again, the reason behind that was because of shifting customer demands. So again, we know that there's a significant amount of consumer-facing responsibilities that 3PLs historically haven't necessarily needed to actually get into. And now, in order to be able to meet, again, those very proclivities, if you will, of the empowered digital consumer, they are also having to just kind of jump into this game as well.
Yeah. The digital consumer is, empowered, like you said. They've got all the tools at a click of a button now. And I think they're driving, a lot of these changes from their side, behavioral changes, as well as, expecting a lot more from their providers. When we were chatting, Juan, you also talked about how this landscape is also changing because of sustainability, a lot of the ESG goals. And, I think it's shifting now. Like at this point in time, it's shifting. But I know like the last couple of years, those were also the focus. Could you shed some light on, what you're seeing in that space as well?
Absolutely. And I think it's all related in many respects. Certainly, again, as we are facing down a growing agency and empowerment of the digital consumer, we have more volatility. And of course, we have, sort of shifting demands that 20 or 30 years ago, we didn't necessarily need to worry about. And so when we think about some of these concepts like nearshoring, I think oftentimes you hear it in the media as very much a geopolitical or a sort of response to sustainability. And they absolutely very much are related to that. But I would say that what's actually triggering that is indeed the continued growing agency of the digital consumer, because again, we're realizing that those brittle supply chains that were based on models from 30 or 40 years ago simply are just not effective to be able to continue to drive the type of resiliency that we need in order to be able to meet those shifting demands. That said, we also know that from a sustainability perspective, it does make sense to localize. It does make sense to be able to bring production to closer to the consumer as well. So there's a benefit both in terms of resilience as well as in terms of sustainability to be able to ensure that our supply chains are that much closer to the end consumer. And then ultimately it also drives more effective, less exposed supply chain, particularly as we step into some times that from a geopolitical perspective are a little bit more volatile.
And so I think some of these folks are starting to set up shop closer, getting the supply chains closer to their consumers as well, and to meet some of these consumer demands with this new version of consumer that's empowered, that's digital, that's really looking to want things as soon as possible and with the most convenience that they can have. So it's definitely interesting to see some of these trends as well, like you said. So switching topics, I know you're a geek. Every time we've connected in the last few months, so we've geeked out, and I'm sure the geek in you is going to jump out now. Tell us a bit about the tech behind the solution and how you built it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my favorite parts of the solution, and I do have a technical background, so if I start geeking out, forgive me. But our platform is Mach enabled, right? So that's microservices architected, API first development, cloud native, and headless, and that, of course, facilitates a number of critical benefits to customers, both, of course, on the technical side as well as in terms of total cost of ownership, speed to value, scalability and extensibility. We leverage Kubernetes for driving scaling of containers to ensure the workloads, are fluctuating as, based on the various conditions. And this really helps us be able to target different markets, whether they're in the SMB space or perhaps more enterprise level types of enterprises. We offer up a highly extensible rule engine that allows for configuring workflows, updating data, invoking internal and external API webhooks based on specific data conditions that may exist in that moment as those workflows are being executed. So, for instance, if you want to perhaps ensure a truck driver takes an image capture of the pallet before it gets loaded as part of that handoff that's taken place, you can go ahead and configure that based on, hey, for these types of shipments that are going to this particular end customer and leveraging this particular carrier, well, let's make sure that image capture is incorporated into the actual workflows. It's a really powerful extensibility to really help customers personalize the solution in a manner that meets, of course, their unique business needs. We also incorporate decentralized ledger technology in order to be able to drive the handoffs between the various participants, as well as to record all the events on an immutable audit trail. And this is really critical because, again, the space that we serve is very much multi-enterprise and collaborative in nature. So it really does call for an elevated degree of data security and reliability. So being able to actually stamp all these events and the digital documents against a decentralized ledger really offers our customers and their partners the confidence in the data that's ultimately, of course, undergirding that enhanced collaboration within their supply network. One last point I'll make, if you'll indulge me. So we also have our technology to patent pending technology, which of course recognizes the novel nature of our solution. And specifically that's in being able to integrate, again, the QR code scans to the various automated workflows that are taking place between the different parties and the various enterprises. So that's a key differentiator to how others have approached the challenge. We want to be able to actually drive the workflows in a seamless manner that does not impose technology, it does not impose mobile apps. And so we leverage, again, very ubiquitous, accessible elements like QR code scans to be able to drive this.
Yeah. I think your customer base, when you think about your ICP and your ideal customer, you probably have different stakeholders at different levels, right? You might have a 3PL or a shipper that probably has is enterprise grade, probably has an IT team, even if they have a problem, they probably have SOPs, they can drive, a lot of change through that. So you've got that sort of a stakeholder that's probably really interested in, hey, I want something secure, governance and regulations are all followed, and, reliability is key for them, governance and all of those pieces. And then you could have a carrier, maybe a mom and pop, smaller carrier that probably is not sophisticated from a tech and an IT perspective, giving them, the novelty of like, hey, you have any device you could do this operation on, not forcing you with a particular hardware or something expensive that you have to buy. If you carry an iPhone, you do it on your iPhone. If it's an Android, it's an Android. If it's a tablet, it's a tablet. So they go and they scan the QR code and are able to do something very quick, right? There's nothing that could go wrong with the QR code. They're scanning, they're, doing their operations, and they're off they're going. So I'm guessing, like some of the technology is a bit more sophisticated, like the rules engine that you talked about, a lot of intelligence built in. So it gives the extensibility, flexibility that some of your larger enterprise-grade customers and stakeholders would prefer. And then you've got the simplicity of the QR code that your carriers would prefer as well. And it's a nice, amazing merge. Sometimes like if I look at enterprise software, like they're built so complex that we forget some of these like smaller stakeholders that may not have that may not need the sophistication and want the simplicity. So you've done really amazing job of like marrying those two things and really meeting the customer where they are and giving them exactly the tools that they need. So it's phenomenal to hear how you've thought about this process. And I'm sure lots of late nights and weekends and, lots of time in between that you've thought about like this sort of simplicity that you want to provide.
I mean, you're exactly right. And to be honest, some of my best ideas come while I'm dreaming. So yes, waking up at 3 a.m. and eureka, I got something I can do. That's really cool. Start writing it down. No, I mean, you're exactly right. We do want to meet customers where they're at, whether they are enterprise level, right? And the level of sophistication that they would represent, or it's a SMB that doesn't really have that. And so one of the things that you'll see within our solution is, yes, we have the integration framework to be able to drive interfacing of data back and forth from external WMSs and TMS and OMS and ERP and so forth. But we also have the ability to enter shipments manually and enter, a new shipment, similar to what a small, enterprise would do when they go on to a national carrier's website and enter the information. You can do the same thing within Aquatio. You can also, capture an image scan of the paper bill of lading in order to be able to extrapolate the data and have it automatically record the shipment transaction within Aquatio. So we've architected all of these things bearing in mind that we need to meet customers where they're at. And ultimately, we want to be able to provide them a solution that brings them a high degree of value, as well as the benefits of extensibility and personalization based on their unique needs.
Yeah, very cool. You talked about the bill of lading. If someone wanted to take a picture of it, do you see a future one where with all this generative AI and tools that are coming up for you to be able to maybe, pull pieces of information from that and store it in some sort of database or, something that's searchable that you can query on and things like that from that image capture as well?
I mean, it's all there, right? Like the moment that you're able to take the moment you're able to capture the image and extrapolate the data, it's called OCR imaging technology. Extrapolate the data and insert it into Aquatio as if it was being inserted manually by a clerk, or if it was being interfaced in by, the integration framework, et cetera. So yeah, absolutely. Being able to then leverage all that data for the purposes of whether it's data mining or, some of the different cool chatbots that are out there that would be able to engage with the various stakeholders as they're communicating with each other and asking specific questions around the shipment transaction, some of the different events that are captured on the audit trail and that type of thing. So there's some really cool things that can be done with the tech that we've put together that would ultimately bring value to our customers.
Right. Every journey obviously comes with a lot of troughs and valleys, highs and lows, as you call them. What were some of the surprises along the way for you? And what did you do to handle them? I'm sure there's plenty that's come along the way in the last year or so. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely, Priya. So this has been definitely a year of learning. Definitely plenty that has kind of needed our focus and perhaps a little bit of elbow grease to work through. But one of the things I was most surprised by was with how quickly we were able to kind of get working models up and running. We kicked off this project in January. We had a demo by March. We had the MVP that was made available in May, and then our first official launch, which came in the last week of August. Now, under any objective criteria, I'd say that that's a feat. And I have to, of course, give credit where credit is due. And I've partnered up with the Fulfillment IQ team, and their development team has been nothing short of outstanding in really delivering on our requirements and building out our novel platform. So I'm very proud of the great work that the FIQ development team has been able to get done. And to be honest, as I work through my demos nowadays, it really just gives me goosebumps to be able to see a lot of our ideas come to life in such a short period of time. Last time I kind of went through this process was, of course, with the Scale WMS, and we didn't have back then the AI-infused development environments and all the awesome tools, of course, that are readily available to folks. So now, this really kind of accelerates speed to market, and it's really cool to be able to kind of see how quickly we've been able to launch these various components. So that's one thing that surprised us. I think another thing that surprised me as well, and it sort of is within the concept of AI as well, just the sheer amount of information that is available to founders nowadays to start up a technology company is really remarkable, whether in terms of market research, some of the go-to-market tools that need to be considered, understanding corporate founding agreements, product strategy. I've spent a lot of time on YouTube. I've spent a lot of time on ChatGPT. And, as a founder, there's always numerous areas that you have to focus on that you've not necessarily previously done. So having these resources at your fingertips really does empower you and give you the confidence that, hey, it's going to be okay. We're going to move this startup forward and we're going to be a success.
Yeah, that's cool. Kudos to you and the Fulfillment IQ team. Was the Fulfillment IQ team both here in the U.S. and, I know they have an offshore team as well. So you worked with both the onshore and the offshore team, Juan?
Absolutely. Yeah, they are pretty spread apart. They have some folks in Canada. They have some folks actually in Mexico, here in the U.S. And then, much of the technical product team is out in Bangalore. And so, yeah, morning stand-up meetings, which has been fun. Obviously engaged with the different leaders on the Fulfillment IQ side as well. They've also been supporting us from a marketing perspective and done an absolutely brilliant job. They have some wizards that have really kind of driven our strategy in that respect. So all in all, a great relationship there with the Fulfillment IQ folks.
Awesome. Yeah. And you talked about how as a founder, if you've had, information at your fingertips, whether it's ChatGPT or YouTube and other things. I was reading something the other day that said with, I guess with cloud, it was easier for founders to found a company because you weren't standing up data centers and, machines in your garage and things like that. And with AI, there's an article that said that there's a lot of solopreneurs. I think previously it was all like, hey, we have 3 founders, each come with different backgrounds, and we're all going to put our different skills together and some investments together and then move. And now with the advent of AI, information, like you said, product, whether it's product strategy or a go-to-market strategy, having access to all of that makes it easier for somebody like you to say, I'm the sole founder. I don't have co-founders at this point, but I'm able to take it and run with it. So it's really interesting to see a live example of that article come to life as well with your journey so far.
No, that makes sense. And yeah, you're exactly right. There's been a lot of support that I've been able to get, both in terms of the resources that are out there, as well as plenty of other folks that have supported me along the way. So
you are now a seasoned founder, Juan. What advice do you have for anyone out there thinking about starting a company and wants to be a founder, but is on the fence, they're nervous about starting something?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, I got plenty, but I'll try to limit it as much as possible. So the first thing that I would say that any founder is going to have to come to grips with is the imposter syndrome, and understanding that, sort of the mindset of, you have the audacity to think that you can change an industry, that you can change how things are done. And of course, you have to work through that and realize, yeah, absolutely. I think, there's some really cool things that I can bring to bear that are going to drive significant value to enterprises across the board. But it is something that I know, especially the first time that you're taking the role and assuming the role of a founder, that you have to kind of work through. The next thing I'll say is understand your why. Why are you going down this path? What are your motivators that are pushing you to build a technology startup? In my case, as I think I may have alluded to in the previous question, I wanted to innovate, build, and create novel solutions that, of course, brought value to customers. And that's my why. And it's important to have really a clear-eyed understanding of that why, because it's what's going to keep you moving along, despite, of course, any of the challenges and maybe some of the adversity that you may face. So, in other people's case, maybe their whys is they want They want to achieve something greater than themselves. Maybe they want to inspire others. Perhaps they want to be a billionaire before they're 30 years old, right? Again, it's a matter of knowing and understanding your whys, as that's really going to keep you grounded as you are sort of encountering the highs and lows of being a founder. And then from a practical standpoint, understanding that as a founder, you probably are bringing this sort of larger than life vision that you're hoping to be able to deploy, right? And the reality is that, you're not going to be able to immediately implement some of these things. So you have to scale that back to more bite-sized chunks, really to specific use cases that, while it feeds into the vision, they can certainly be implemented in more incremental types of steps. This, of course, is not only going to help you with regards to things like budget and timeline, it's going to help you define your ICP based on how your startup is evolving, because your ICP, as soon as you've released your first official release, it's going to be different than 12 months after. It's going to be different than 36 months after, et cetera. So being able to actually have those sort of incremental steps to help you really identify what is that target profile that you're wanting to go after is very helpful. And then finally, again, as we spoke about earlier, there are plenty of resources, and there's also lots of people out there in your network that are more than willing to support you through this process. A lot of times it's going to feel like you're going at it alone. And if you don't have that sort of ongoing support of mentors and advisors and perhaps maybe other founders that are in a similar space, it's going to be very tough. So look to expand your community of cheerleaders, of people that are supporting you, of that support network. And not only will they, of course, support you when you need it most, but the types of insights and exchanges and brilliance that you're going to get from them will absolutely be invaluable.
Thank you for that sage advice. So you will feel like an imposter. It's okay. Just keep moving and marching forward with your vision. Absolutely important to know your why. It helps you articulate why is it that you're interested in building. And as you bring on teams, as you grow your business, it's also important to talk to your, customers, your employees, and your investors about what drives you and what's your why. Innovate, build, and create, mantra. It's really cool that you're going back to the basics and saying, I want to be closer to the customer. I want to build and innovate and create value for both the customer as well as your shareholders and your employees as well. Prioritization, this is probably one of the hardest thing as a founder to do, because you're probably, 100 steps ahead of what your team can bring and move along with you. And your eyes are obviously bigger than your stomach, and so that prioritization process is key and very important. And as you said, there's so much so many mentors that you've probably encountered along the way. I've had experience with a lot of mentors as well. If you can share and I'll put a summary with some notes and details, if you have any mentors that have been valuable to you and are available for other founders, we can always add it to the podcast notes as well. So other folks that are founders would be able to reach out and get some, contact information as well. This is, absolutely amazing piece of advice. Juan, thank you so much for the time spending with us and with our audience, sharing your story, your background, the company that you're building, and we wish you the best and want to turn to you to see if you have any closing comments.
Well, thank you, Priya. This has absolutely been a treat for me to also participate in one of your first podcasts here with Silk Road. And, I do genuinely believe that we are absolutely in a moment, and there's a conflation of different elements that are taking place, partly related to, we talked about the empowerment of the digital consumer, partly related to, of course, some of the challenges on the supply side and these sort of historically dated models that continue to exist. And a lot of it is, of course, driving things like compliance, transparency, and visibility further upstream in the value chain. And so when you think of the types of visibility that historically Parcel has had, where, you can see the type of the events, you can actually track and have traceability over, the actual shipment. You can even access some of the digital documents. That's not something that historically you've seen on the freight side. And so as all of these different, these events are shaping our current moment, and you do see more of that shifting of the visibility and compliance and transparency needs further upstream. Aquatio is absolutely here to work with 3PLs, distributors, manufacturers, and other shippers that need to make sure that they level up with regards to their visibility and are able to ultimately drive the value to their customers in order to be able to continue to meet the moment.
Really well said. Thank you again, Juan.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you found our conversation insightful and packed with actionable takeaways to enhance your supply chain strategy. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious and keep innovating.